Good evening everyone and welcome to Richmond Valley Council's Ordinary Council meeting, April. I'll open the meeting with acknowledgement of country. Richmond Valley Council recognises the people of the Bundjalung Nations as custodians and traditional owners of this land, and we value and appreciate the continuing culture connection to lands, their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region in the past, present and future. I'll now ask the General Manager to read the prayer, please.
Dear Lord, we meet to serve our Richmond Valley community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognise our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. Amen.
Thank you. I just need to go to my office and find a couple of pieces of paper. I apologise. Sorry about that. We now move on to item 3, public access and question time. Our first speaker is Mrs Deborah Johnson of Bungawalbin in relation to item 14.1 flood recovery update and item 17.1 local roads and community infrastructure grants, phase 3 project nomination. I'd now like to welcome Ms Johnson. Welcome. Just start when you're ready. You have a presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Just press F5 and it'll go beginning. Okie dokie. All right, here we go. I stand before you today and ask for patience and understanding as I plead with you, do not forget Bungawalbin. This has been an exhausting time for everyone in the flooded areas and especially for the Richmond Valley, which has not been getting the media attention that more highly populated areas received. However, we've had some amazing volunteers based in Coracai that have been helping us push through. I ask the Council to do what they can to allow those volunteers to continue assisting unhindered. I applaud the Council's commitment in the Richmond Valley flood response to source urgent assistance and funding to stabilise and restore eroded riverbanks, riparian corridor habitat, as well as programs to restore river health in the Richmond River catchment. Bungawalbin has an extremely high nature conservation values with one of the highest biodiversity levels in Australia, providing key habitat to many vulnerable and endangered species. Please ensure Council include the Bungawalbin Creek, its tributaries and wetlands in the restoration works. The Bungawalbin levee, built in 1945, is a critical flood mitigation asset protecting residents and property in Bungawalbin, Swan Bay, New Italy and Woodburn. No major repairs were needed to the levee until 2017, when the Pacific Highway upgrade dammed the Richmond catchment, increasing the height, volume and velocity of water in the river. Rouse County Council was unable to sufficiently repair the levee, which broke through again in the same spot in 2021 and 22. This entire 5-kilometre Bungawalbin levee is now in a dangerous state and requires immediate attention. I have pleaded with Rouse, Richmond Valley Council, Resilience New South Wales, the Army, SES and our local member for immediate help, but no one will fix it. Bunga is a vast catchment, almost 2,000 square kilometres. The upgrade of the Woodburn-Corrico Road seems to have created an additional small dam holding the waters back in the Bunga Basin. They have never drained away this slowly before. Parts of the creek were still flooded until yesterday, and the water inundating the main access road has only just receded, leaving huge holes, making the road almost impassable. Was there any consideration given to the effect the road upgrade would have in stopping the ground and surface water getting into the Richmond River? There is currently a section of the creek over 70 kilometres long with no flood or rain gauges. Because of this, we were not issued an evacuation notice until we had reached well above major flood level and it was too late to leave. Just last week, I had to contact BOM to advise that their readings were incorrect and we were still flooded. Woodburn residents were mistakenly told to return to their homes with the river still rising. I also provided daily updates to the SES of the river levels. As previously requested, it is essential that the Neely's Lagoon river height gauge be repaired and additional rain and river height gauges be installed as a matter of urgency for flood mitigation, as advised in the 2010 flood study. I understand BMT Global have submitted the recent flood study in February and ask when this vital information will be available for public viewing. Flood debris and rubbish has not been able to be picked up yet, and much of the debris that was piled was scattered in the second flood, so must be recollected. There are still many properties out here that need to have rubbish removed by council from within the property. Please advise residents a time frame of when this will occur. Not only have many people in Bunga had to gut their homes, but there are many businesses that need help too. It is preferable for most to stay on their properties in order to salvage, repair and restore what they can and tend to the farmland, livestock and animals. It is not feasible for rural residents to be moved off their land and into the parks proposed in Wollongbar and Ballina. I implore Council to use a common sense approach and consider options like the Woodburn Company Big River modular cabins or caravans, or using existing sheds as granny type flats, etc., until homes can be restored. This will allow residents to remain on their land. There are over 100 households in the Bunga and Gibberagee area, as well as cane, tea tree, macadamia and cattle farmers. There are also many other businesses and self-employed residents in Bunga, mechanics, tradies, consultants, video producers, manufacturers, authors. With the road too dangerous to drive on and the river and levee in a critical state, it is important that Richmond Valley Council provide the emergency assistance that will allow residents to recover and rebuild. As support services wind down, we continue to be marginalised. The road not being addressed has limited the services available to us. On top of all the disaster-related issues and challenges, the sense of despair, loss and abandonment now comes with an increase in crime and in feeling unsafe for so many in our community. There is a huge sense of being in limbo, which is counterproductive to recovery. Many of the community recovery and resilience resources in other areas have missed us and moved on. We need support. Please do not forget Bunga. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your address. Any questions, councillors? Councillor McGillan?
Hi, Debbie.
Hello.
Firstly, okay, what was the response that you got from SES? Did they ring you and say you need to evacuate now? Did anybody let you know that you need to move?
We received a text message 3 hours after the river had exceeded maximum ever level recorded, and the text message was get to high ground. 3 hours after, there was no way. It was well above recorded level. 12 hours later, we didn't, but Swan Bay and Woodburn received an evacuation order. This is in the first flood.
All right.
There was no way we could get out.
No. No, definitely. Okay, and where do we go from there? With your response, I know it's not council, it's SES, but there was lives at risk. There was so how can this, are you saying it's coming from the gauge, that the gauge was read incorrectly to give the information for the warning?
There was not enough data in relation to the river heights and the rainfall in the area, and there hasn't been for many years. And the 2010 study suggested that more gauges be put in because that's a very long length of river with a huge drop, like something like 15-metre drop from Neely's Lagoon to the Bungawabbin Junction. So there needs to be more data in between that area.
So how many gauges are?
There's a gauge at the Richmond River Bungawabbin Junction, so where Bungawabbin Creek starts, and then there's one at Neely's Lagoon. That's it.
Okay.
So without that data, we don't know. And then in this flood, in the first flood, it topped out at 14 metres and it hasn't been back online since. So we have no idea. So it's literally whoever could get a text message out with telling people what was happening upstream so we knew what was coming to us.
Jeez. Okay. Okay. So you're saying that you're feeling like you're being forgotten. I understand it's flood. So what has been provided as information for you out there to say, you know, like, I know they can't get through. You can't get the washing machine business through. You can't get an electrician through. So you just have to bide your time and...
That's right, and a lot of people lost their vehicles. So even if you could get out, you don't have a vehicle to get in, to get out. Nobody can get in. The only people we saw up the river were the volunteers, and they came 3 times and did 3 food drops to us over that time.
And that time
we did see the helicopter once landed to check in the second flood. A helicopter landed once to check, and that was the Rural Fire Service, just checking that we were okay.
Okay, so where did they land? How far up?
They landed on our property
Okay.
once the waters had receded enough that they could get onto our pad.
Right, but you're only at the beginning of Bungawabbin.
That's correct. There are still people that still have water at their feet.
Right.
It's crazy.
All right.
It's really crazy.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question.
Thank you, Councillor.
Debbie, your experience out there and talking to the residents out there and the long-time residents, how much longer this time has the water been held back in comparison to other floods? Are we talking weeks?
Weeks,
days?
absolutely weeks. So between the two, we had about 3 days where we could drive out the road, drive out our driveway, and we're only at like 6 k's down the road, so we're not even far. You go a little bit further south of us, a couple of kilometres, that water has not gone. That water's still there from 28th of February. It's absolutely crazy. And the water is coming back. It sounds silly, but it is flowing back from the east. It is not getting out, it's going and then it's coming back at us. And we've been there 20 years and we've experienced nothing like this. And I saw that you're looking at, you know, considering a dam type option for Coraki because of all the backwater. That's because the water that usually leaves Bungawabbin and heads out through Swan Bay, Woodburn and New Italy just gently can't get out. So it's all just being pushed back. So then it's all getting pushed back out into Coraki. That's what's happening.
After the first flood, had the waters receded enough to access those roads before the second flood come?
Only down to about 9 kilometres down the road. By road, that's correct. So there's nothing you could have done until now, but there is a massive hole at about 1300, 1330, that it is it's a pond. It's a massive pond about 1 metre deep in the deepest part because it's got a clay base in it. The water cannot escape because the ground is so sodden, it can't dissipate through the ground. So something needs to be done to pump that water out so you can actually fill it, even if it's just truckloads of rubble just dumped in it so those people can get out. There's a lot of people down there.
Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, just 2 quick questions. In terms of your observation with the levee at the moment, like there's a couple of holes in it or there's massive damage?
Massive holes.
Okay.
Massive holes. We
Yeah.
just need a moderate, even a minor to moderate flood now, and it's going to roll through that levee and back out through Woodburn
Yeah,
and flood them.
And just very briefly, in terms of the damage to the levee on the first flood, what do you think that impact that damage would have had for the second flood? In terms of the damage to the levee?
Yeah, so the water in the paddock side in the second flood took a lot longer as well to go down because it just kept filling up. So normally the river to the west. It gets down to a certain height, the levee's on the east, and it just flows out to Corrocky and out through the Richmond River that way, just gently, nicely through all the canals. But this time, because the hole was in the levee, the water, instead of going that way, the water was pushed back out to the east, so filling up all the farmlands on that eastern side, which is what the levee normally protects.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Deborah, for address. Just before you go, but I would like to encourage you, and I do notice that the General Manager has taken a real lot of notes from your address, but I would encourage you to put in a submission to the recently announced inquiry. I know that people would like council, that we will be doing an inquiry with a lot of people's concerns, but the more community members that put it in, I think it will have more meaningful
Thank you.
purpose.
We are putting all that data together. We have got our draft ready, and I really appreciate that you look into the community for, I suppose, local knowledge in relation to this.
Yep.
It's really important, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Might just like to mention that those submissions have got to be in by the 20th of May. Read somewhere?
I think it's the 22nd. So
Okay, not long. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Richard Gates, exiting member of the Evans Head Residence for Sustainable Development Incorporated, in relation to 15.1 Fraud and Corruption Control Plan, 15.2 Financial Analysis Report, March 2022, and 19.5 Correspondence to New South Wales Premier. Welcome, Mr. Gates. When you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, assembled folks, I'd like to spend the preponderance of my time on the financial analysis report, and we'll come to the other two matters following that initial discussion. I've spoken to Council's financial analysis reports on previous occasions, raising concerns about investment in fossil fuels and lack of transparency and information regarding some investments. Council continues to make investments in fossil fuels. Roughly a third of all investments are in the fossil fuel industry. I find it astonishing that Council could continue to invest in the very industry which is contributing to climate change, a significant factor in the recent floods, which have devastated this local government area and most particularly its citizenry. How can you continue to invest in an industry which is harming it? Where is the signal to the marketplace that it's time to move on to long-term sustainability in keeping with the principle of intergenerational equity, which is supposed to be part of your decision-making according to Section 8 of the New South Wales Local Government Act? There's another issue here which in my view needs to be raised about council investments, and that is investment risk. In the concise investment report pack contained in your business papers, 2 T-Corp unit trusts are listed. With a current market value of a little over 15 million, these unit trusts represent nearly 22% of council's total investments. Unit trusts are unincorporated mutual funds that pass profits directly to investors rather than reinvesting in the fund. The investor is the trust beneficiary. Returns are not guaranteed, and you can lose money. You might want to examine how well T-Corp's trusts are travelling, notwithstanding claims about medium and long-term investments and changes over time. T-Corp provides advice about such investments and recommends that all councils considering investing in T-Corp funds obtain independent legal and financial advice prior to investing to ensure that they have a complete understanding of the risks attached to these investment products, and that they invest in products consistent with their risk appetite, which begs the question, so what is Council's risk appetite, keeping in mind its prior history of investments in CDOs and other instruments which led to council losing money on investments made on behalf of its ratepayers more than a decade ago during the GFC. It's useful, I think, here to look at the disclaimer at the end of the concise investment report pack from Laminar Capital, which, by the way, has been taken over by the Perpetual Group. Laminar is up front. This document, it says, this document does not purport to identify the nature of the specific market or other risks associated with these products. Before entering into any transaction in relation to the products, the investor should ensure that it fully understands the terms of the product and the transaction, relevant risk factors, the nature and extent of the investor's risk of loss, and the nature of the contractual relationship into which the investor is entering. Prior to investing in these products, an investor should determine, based on its own independent review and such professional advice as it deems appropriate, the economic risks and merits, the legal, tax accounting characteristics and risk, and the consequence of an investment in them. So what independent advice did council receive before it decided to invest in these T-Corp products? And what exploration was made of potential conflicts of interest? Was that advice independent? And with these unit trusts, is capital preservation guaranteed? I think not. Councillors, the ball is in your court, and you will be held responsible if your investment decisions lead to loss of ratepayer funds, as happened with the GFC. You cannot rely on the argument that others in government are making the same investments. That argument no longer washes. The fraud and corruption plan raises some interesting matters but requires additional work. This is a plan that must be subject to public scrutiny and further discussion before it is accepted. Additions include accountability for behind closed doors meetings held regularly by council under the rubric of information workshops, a surefire mechanism for creating an environment with potential for corruption. There's a lot more to say about that, but not here. Finally, correspondence with the Premier. In my view, it's a bit rich to be insisting on changes to rate pegging given the current circumstances in our local government area and long period of special rate variations. Perhaps council might like to stop being the state's handmaiden and ask for the money lost from federal assistance grants, particularly given the CEFA indices, which show what disadvantage we were at prior to the current round of disasters. And perhaps council might like to stop subsidising developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any speakers? Any questions, sorry? No questions? Thank you very much, and to for your address, and to both of our public access speakers tonight, Deborah and Richard. Have a safe trip home. As we all know, the roads are over. They really need a bit of attention, like all over the region. So we're doing our best, like all other councils are. But as we know, it was a catastrophic flood, and yeah, it's unprecedented road damage just at present everywhere. So thank you. Apologies. I have two apologies, one from Councillor Humphreys and one from Councillor Cornish. Could I get a mover, please? Moved. Councillor Morrissey, seconder.
Second.
Councillor Hayes. Put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Item 5.1 on page 6. I'll move that.
Second.
Councillors, it's pretty straightforward. While these floods were on, it's very hard, as we know, all the roads were cut, but I will say I rang around to friends in Corrockeye, Woodburn, Rapville and Broadwater, and I'd also like to thank Councillor McGillan and Councillor Hayes. I was on daily, at least, ringing them to find out what was happening in that area of our council. So everyone had a story to tell, and I just commit the recommendation for support, please. If there's anyone else who would like to speak, I know that Councillor Hayes and Councillor McGillen both had their challenges and experienced the flood themselves. Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, well, first of all, I fully support the mayoral minute. You do note in the mayoral minute that there was support from other councils, and that's been mentioned in previous meetings. I believe Coffs Harbour and possibly some other councils. Yeah, which has been absolutely fantastic. And I guess I'm just checking if a letter of thanks has been sent to those councils, or if not, could some formal thanks be passed on?
They will be acknowledged. Did you want to give an update on that, Mr General Manager?
So we had Coffs, another council that's provided a lot of supports, Lake Macquarie. Had quite a few of their staff. We sort of continue to get some support there. So. And offers from many others and assistance in different ways. So no, we certainly, and we're in contact with each of those councils and will be, obviously that's part of getting this mayoral minute done, is that we can, when we respond and thank them for that, we can point to the fact that we do have a resolution of council acknowledging their support through this period.
Yeah,
Councillor Hayes.
Just like to add, look, I fully support the mayoral minute. I've picked out a bit in there where you've mentioned that council has prepared impact statements so that the state and federal governments are aware of the scale of the catastrophe and the physical resources our community needs to recover. I agree, and I would like to think that the broader community agree that our council management and staff have provided the necessary responses for a higher level of government to respond and fund the rebuilding of our communities. This has now become evident with the late inclusion of the next two mayoral minutes tonight. So I think that's a great result with those two documents.
Thank you. Look, there was a lot said at the last meeting. It was a very emotional meeting last meeting, so I think we'll move on. There's a couple more notice of motions to come, which will have a bit of information and debate coming out of those. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. So, councillors, you now have a supplementary couple of agenda, which has a couple of more mayoral minutes, and I apologise for these coming out late, but the meeting, the Reconstruction Corporation, which is 15.2, that was only released today, and the other one, the other meeting was Northern Rivers Resilience Initiative. That was only Thursday, which was just before Good Friday. So if I did not put this up tonight, it would have been a month, and it would have been just too long. So I apologise for putting that out late, but there was no other opportunity. So, councillors, today you may have seen that there is a Reconstruction Corporation been announced. There was a lot of lobbying going on for this by political parties, and I think there was over 10,000 on a petition. The government has now acknowledged that, and they will set up this commission. It will start on the 1st of July, and as I mentioned earlier about the inquiry, a lot of the findings of that inquiry will be taken on board by this this corporation, and they will have a advisory committee. Then they will have subcommittees under that with a real lot of local knowledge people. So it's been, I think, for the last few weeks, really a lot of ideas going into this, and Deputy Premier Paul Toole will, he will be heading it up. I just can't find the gentleman who's, sorry? David? Yeah, I've got that here somewhere and I'll put it aside. He will be, I know there's comments about it should be based in the Northern Rivers. His offices are in the Hunter in Newcastle, but there will be an office set up in this region. That was made quite clear today, that will occur, so there will be local staff operating on that. So I would think that some councillors will... David Witherden. So I'm sure that some councillors would like to make comment on this. I know it's been a subject that's been thrown around for a few weeks. So Councillor Hayes.
I've got a question, but I'll just state a couple of things before I get to the question for you, if you can answer it. It says, following on from the responses that we've received from the state government today and last Thursday, providing for the rebuilding of infrastructure and proposed works to reduce the impact of flooding in the region in the future, I said, do you feel that the state, along with the federal government, are fully aware of the financial burden on individual uninsured members of the community to be in a position to rebuild their damaged properties and remain in these communities, and the urgency to supply the grants that have been announced as available for application to these people?
Look, every chance I get to talk a politician, and I've seen a fair few over the last month, I make it quite clear that we need to get these grants into people's pockets to give them some confidence. The first time I met the Prime Minister in Lismore, I'll tell you my exact words. We were sitting in the Mayor's office in Lismore with the Mayor and their General Manager and our General Manager, and we were talking about what the community needed. It was decided the first three things was to get the waste off and people's belongings off the streets. That is emotionally sapping for people to see that there every day, and also the health risk. So that was one. The other was some temporary housing, and then to get some money in these people's pockets. Unfortunately, a lot of that money isn't flowing, I believe, as quickly as it could be, and that was made quite clear last Thursday. And I'll talk about that on the next, because it was at that meeting. Today it was made quite clear to the Premier again by some mayors and also by the media. They need some reinsurance to community. But back to the Prime Minister, after we agreed with that, I said, there's another thing. And he said, oh, what's that? And I said, you got to get rid of the red tape and all the bullshit, because I've seen that with the fires. And I didn't think I could be more straightforward than that. Unfortunately, there's still red tape involved in this. This new Reconstruction Corporation, they keep saying that they're going to get rid of red tape. Let's hope they do, because that is slowing a lot of things down. And hopefully the inquiry people's putting in those submissions, that will come through loud and clear. And out of that inquiry, this Reconstruction Corporation can get on with the job. But in saying that, I'm now seeing people on Facebook saying if you give them an open hand, what's going to happen? So you can't keep both people happy. I know the people who are affected, they just want to see something happening so they can get some normality back in their lives. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Morrissey.
I'll second it if you want to move it.
I'm sorry. Sorry?
I'll second it if
Sorry.
you move it.
Thank you for that. Any other speakers? Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, just firstly, fully support the mayoral minute, and yeah, it seems by the comments that you're making that council will have a a seat at the table for this reconstruction corporation?
That hasn't been actually said publicly, where that was bandied around today, that we need to have some local input, and naturally we worry about our residents and it concerns the residents getting back into their homes, but the residents in the community expect all the infrastructure to be reinstated better than it was before, and they keep saying build back better, and the council will be the organisation that will do that. There'll be 7 councils in this area, and I would expect that someone from council will have to be involved in those meetings.
Okay. Is it necessary at this stage to make a formal request for the Mayor and General Manager to be part of developing terms and reference and so forth?
Look, the CEO's heading this up. He's offered to, yesterday on the phone, I had a phone call, a half an hour meeting when they told us that they were going to announce this today, and he offered to come and meet all the mayors and general managers, and I was a bit rude because I said to him, it's all right to come and meet and shake a hand and say, you know, how you going? Like, I've seen a lot of that happening. I said, if you're coming, we want you, be very generous with your time. You'll need to be here 2 to 3 hours for us to get our message across. And today, he said, I took that on board, what you said yesterday. I said, well, we're looking forward to meeting you and working with you over the next few years to get some positive outcomes for our community. So I think we'll mention that there, and by that time I would think they will have some idea of where they're going to go with these advisory committees and community groups. And look, I'll give the undertaking, every time we have an update, you'll be getting a mayoral minute, like you have been since the devastating floods. Okay. Any other speakers? I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? And on the supplementary agenda, page 4, is the Northern River Resilient Initiative, and I'll move that, and I can get a seconder,
Second.
please.
Second.
Councillor Morrissey, thank you. It's just a shame that one of our previous speakers just left, because she did talk about Bunga Walbin, and at this meeting the General Manager's accompanied with it, and I sat and listened for 20 minutes to half an hour, and from what I heard it was Wilson catchment, Richmond catchment, Ballina, Lismore, and I just let it all go, and then when they asked me if I wanted to speak, I just said I think you're making a bit of a mistake here. We've heard about the Wilson and the Richmond catchment. There's a catchment called the Bunga Walbin. Hasn't been mentioned today. It has a devastating effect. It's got a massive catchment area, the Bunga Walbin, and I don't think people realise, if you go out past Deep Creek, out on the Leeville School, you go along the straight and up over a hill. As soon as you go up over that hill, it'll only be about 13 kilometres out, you are in the Bunga Walbin catchment. So just out of Casino, that's where that Bunga Walbin starts taking water from. Takes water all from the Great Dividing Range up around Busby's Flat and up further, and brings it down through Rapville. And the other night they got 75 mils out there, and we didn't get any here. And next day on Facebook, Nandy Dar Bridge and the entrance into Rapville was cut. So that's how much water it gets affected into the lower river. And I know it goes in below Coracai, but it was mentioned earlier that water backs up around behind Coracai, and it also really affects Woodburn and Broadwater. So I've made them quite aware that the Bunga Walbin catchment area needs to be included. It has to be a holistic catchment area of the Richmond River, and they took that on board. The other thing that, and I did say there that I welcome the focus on retention rather than diversion. I think once you start diverting a lot of water, you affect somewhere else, especially if it's a large diversion. You're going to impact somewhere else. In saying that, I also had a resident from Korakai asked about putting a levy from the golf course across to Peters and Quarry, and that's in that. I raised that issue. So these are all issues, and also the Pacific Motorway. I did raise at that, and that'll have, this mayoral minute will have no effect on a notice of motion coming later, because this is with the Northern Rivers Resilience Initiative, not the inquiry. All right, so that won't have any effect on that. So, yeah, whenever I get a chance, I make Richmond Valley's councils and our communities' thoughts heard, and I'll continue to do that and advocate for, get the best for our community and council as I can. So another one that was the other day, and I'll talk to the General Manager later about it, was now I've got people, farmers and that, up the upper Richmond, up Eden Creek and Ironpot Creek, and they just don't realise, they don't think the rain was enough to cause Casino to flood like it did, because Kyogle didn't have a massive flood, not a really massive flood. So they're asking me, can I find out if there was any water released out of Toonabar Dam? So I don't know how we go about that, but that's something I think the inquiry needs to look at. How is Toonabar Dam managed in these events? Because I can tell you at my place, 4 kilometres up the river, I was, at lunchtime, I was looking at advice, and it was low to moderate flood, and all of a sudden it changed to a major, and never had water in my house, and all of a sudden I get 2 metres. So it's come from somewhere. I don't know. I'm not saying it's Toonabar. Maybe there was another arm of the tributary that got it up there, and Kyogle didn't, Myangry. So, but all these things need to be looked at in the inquiry. So yes, we're taking on all the community's concerns and passing them on to the relevant agencies. Any other speaker? Put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. And once again, apologies for putting those late motions up. Page 7, item 6, confirmation of the minutes. Could I get a mover, please?
Yeah, I'll move.
Councillor Hayes, seconder.
Yeah, I'll second.
Councillor Deegan. Is everyone okay with the accuracy of the minutes? Yep, I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Matters arising out of that item. No matters arising. We're now over on page 8. Declarations of interest. Has any councillor got a declaration of interest? Mr. General Manager, you have any?
Yes, I've received one from Councillor Morrissey, just in relation to item 19.4, development applications. He's just identified a non-pecuniary insignificant conflict.
Thank you. I see there's nil petitions. Page 9, 10.1, a notice of motion by Councillor Robert Hayes. Councillor Hayes.
Look, just before I move that notice of motion, if the Mayor will allow, or the Council will allow, I'd like to just change it and cross off inclusive of the following information and get rid of those dot points. So I feel they can be decided at a later date when we do our draft meeting practice, code of meeting practice, when we actually get to the document.
Thank you. So you'll move that motion with
Yeah,
deletion of those 5 dot points.
Yes.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor McGillen?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes?
Yeah, I just think with all the issues facing council at present and into the future, particularly housing shortages and damaged infrastructure repairs and upgrades due to the recent floods, we may get many presentations in the at future meetings.
Councillor, we're still on item 10.1. Am I missing something? You're right?
Yep, I'm just...
Oh, okay, sorry. Yep, you're right. Sorry, I know where you're coming from now. Apologies.
Okay. So
Thought you moved on to the next one.
Yeah, no. As a councillor representing the broader community, I feel as though we need to be presented with true and accurate presentations which indicate the true scale of the community's wishes. That's why I've moved that notice of motion.
Yep. Thank you. Any other speakers? Right, a reply? No?
Oh,
I'll
sorry.
put that, oh, sorry, councillor Deegan.
Yeah, just a quick question. So there doesn't appear to be a huge difference now between the current code of meeting practice and the adjustment. I'm just trying to work that out. So, yeah, so basically the current practice is that individuals on behalf of the organisation must provide proof they have the organisation's authority, but now this would be saying, yeah, I'm just trying to see what the main difference is. So they need written authority currently. What would this change it to exactly?
Councillor Hayes.
So currently we've got the option of asking them for that information before they address council. This notice of motion means they have to supply it before they speak.
Okay.
That's the only difference.
Yeah, and just regarding the staff comment on this motion, would that then need to go out to public consultation before any change was put in place?
Mr General Manager.
Yes, it does. So yeah, we're reviewing the draft code at the moment. I envisage potentially next month you'll receive that to then put it out for community consultation. So the community has the opportunity and is required to have the opportunity to review that code of meeting practice. So I envisage that'll be next month. So that change really, yeah, it's as Councillor Hayes pointed, it's may be asked. So it's changing it from may be asked to being required to provide it prior to commencing their address. So that's the main difference.
Okay, and I guess my follow-up question would be, what is the current practice? Is that proof, or is that evidence currently asked for in terms of when people are speaking on behalf of an organisation?
In my experience, no. When people request to do public access, it will depend on what's in their email. Some will have a sign-off that they are representing a particular group. So it depends on what they put forward. It's maybe asked. Look, we don't have large numbers of people coming to public access, so our approach is to, I suppose, encourage that. But I think where there's an organisation, there is an argument that that organisation, where someone is purporting to represent an organisation, the size of that organisation, its scale, is a relevant factor as to how much people take into account what is said by that representative of an organisation. So I think that's Councillor Hayes' intent here.
Yeah, I guess I'll just make a comment. I'll probably vote against the motion just for two reasons. One, we don't have a lot of speakers as it is, and secondly, there's a process commencing in a month's time that this would be preempting. I understand Councillor Hayes may not have been aware of that when he put the motion initially, but I'd prefer personally just to wait for that process to happen as scheduled.
This way I understand it is this motion will not be adopted. It won't be included into the code of meeting practice until the review is done. When the review is done, councillors will have input there. I'll support it, the reason being you can have an organisation and you could have an executive, but the way it is now, I think just a member could come and talk on behalf of the organisation who is not even on the executive, which sometimes they have different views. So I think if you're a member of an executive and you have permission from a meeting to come and address, I think that's more prudent than someone just saying, oh, I'm just an ordinary member, could be associate member, I'm going to go and talk on behalf of the club. So I think it really needs to be tightened up.
Yeah, so I guess the other alternative then would be to encourage council to, like, even though it's not stated, it's not, the current policy doesn't say that they have to provide that evidence, maybe council staff may choose to ask for that more regularly until the review's undertaken.
And, you know, and they may be asked, you know, now, so. Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Hayes? No? I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Deakin against. Page 10, 10.2. The seconder was Councillor McGillan. Mover for this, please.
Move that 10.2 as written.
Yeah, and
Seconder.
I'll second.
Councillor Hayes.
I'd just like to make a statement that, you know, as you're aware, I didn't have access to any of the information that has surfaced in today's agenda prior to preparing this notice of motion. The flood recovery report, item 14.1, and the Merrill minutes 5.2 and 5.3 in the paper now provide a fair coverage to support this notice of motion. So I'd just like to move it as written.
Councillor Deakin.
Yeah, I did flag with Councillor Hayes before the meeting, as the next notice of motion is one of mine on the same topic, that we might be able to, if Councillor Hayes agrees, move some of the points from my notice of motion into Councillor Hayes' motion, and then I would withdraw my motion if that was supported.
If Councillor Hayes is happy to have that included in his motion, you can add to his motion.
I had a discussion with Patrick earlier. I'm happy to include, and I was going to second that motion of his at any rate. So happy to have those dot points of his 1, 2, 3, and 4 included as 2, 3, and 2, 3, 4, and 5 under mine. Is that what you want to do?
Yeah. There's just a question that was raised with me that councillors, my point one, councillors already acknowledged the flood events were unprecedented and that we might not possibly be able to use that point again when that's already been acknowledged from council.
I think it's okay to use it there, but not just on the next two all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's okay to be included. I'm just seeing if we're doubling up with any of these with the other one. Do you know what I'm like? If see, we're mentioning motorway and
Yeah, so I would be withdrawing my motion, which is
Okay.
which is 10.3,
Yeah.
and the items, and then those dot points would come over into.
yeah, but some of those are identical into what the motion is already.
Yep. So I guess just add in.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So we're
yeah.
repeating ourselves, and it's just repetitive.
Yep. So maybe 0.3 and 4 would that? Yeah, 0.3 and 4 came over to Councillor Hayes' motion.
So besides the inquiry, you want to write to the agencies?
Yeah, so I guess my, there's lots of concerns in the mid-Richmond area about the impact of the highway, and my view is it's important that there is some form of standalone inquiry,
Okay.
so that it doesn't get lost within other inquiries that are undertaken that then comes out as a couple of paragraph summary in a report, whereas if we had something to really focus on the concerns of the people in the mid-Richmond in relation to the impact of the highway. And I do have a bit of information to share in relation to the environmental impact study that was done in 2012, so I don't know whether that's, maybe we've got to work out what the points are first before I go into detail on that.
Okay. And look, I know if you withdraw part 2, which is already set in the Councillor Hayes' motion, there's things in there that can be put into the inquiry out of that recommendation anyway. So, you know, when we do that, I would expect that we can, councillors can have a look at that submission to the inquiry. All right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
just so long as it I guess includes the point that council writes to the appropriate government agency, and I'm suggesting that might be the Department of Transport to do a standalone inquiry on the impact of the highway. There may be a more appropriate agency, but I guess that was the agency I
Okay.
thought might be appropriate.
So where I'm with this is Councillor Hayes' notice of motion, and also 3 and 4 from Councillor Deegan's notice of motion. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Sorry?
Remove 2 and 3 as is.
Yep.
And now we've got
And that will go over now into 10.2. Mr. General Manager, how's that look?
I think that's intent. Councillor Deegan's happy with it.
Yep. Okay. It all fits in the code of meeting practice then? Okay. That item 1's not the same as here, is it?
It's similar, just between 1 and 3. Slight.
It should be that. It should be Robert's notice of motion, and then that. And that.
No, he was having his point 1 and then Councillor Deegan's point 2 and 3. So his point 1 is combined.
That's not. That's not 10.2.
Because that's not a...
Huh? It should be that.
But that's not a resolution.
Oh,
So what
okay.
they've done is say, say that council.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Okay.
That's commentary.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Can you read that, everyone?
Okay. Okay.
Yep, happy with that.
Okay. Speakers?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's, I'm going to try not to bore people too much with detail here. I just want to note there was an environmental impact study conducted in 2012 in relation to the highway, and I did send a link to that to the General Manager just before the meeting, so he can access that information. So, yeah, without bogging down too much in detail, so point 8.417 of the environmental impact study addressed the flood impacts in the Mid-Richmond River area and the likely impacts. So in relation to 1 in 100 year flood event, the report found that in the Mid-Richmond there'd be a less than 50 mil increase in flood heights in houses, less than 50 mil increase in flood heights on sugarcane land, less than 250 mil increase in flood height on grazing land and grazing, forested and other rural lands. It noted no change in direction of water courses or the direction of flood flows except for the constriction into and the expansion out of discrete openings such as culverts and bridges and constructed diversions. It did say that generally the most significant changes in flood levels along the project are expected to be during a 1 in 100 year event. So I guess that's one of the reasons I'd like a standalone inquiry, because it seems to be accepted that this was a larger than a 1 in 100 year event, and it'd be good to get some information around that. And probably the most important point that I found, it stated that houses along the bank of the Richmond River to the west of the project would experience increases of up to 40 mils, while properties to the east of the project would experience a reduction of 50 mils. It had also noted there'd be a reduction in evacuation and access time of around 5 hours for land between 1.1 to 1.4 metres during a 1 in 100 year flood event. So the environmental impact study found that there would be impacts, and those impacts would be greater in larger flood events. So I think it's really important that there's immediate and focused inquiry to have a look at the impacts, particularly during the larger flood event.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
I recall that information being relayed to us, I'm thinking 6 or 7 years ago when they were doing the design work, and I can remember the plus or minus 50 millimetres either side of the highway. So yeah, I fully support that bit of information going into that.
Any other speakers? Put that motion then. All those in favour? Thank you. So 10.3 has been withdrawn. 10.4, Councillor Deegan.
It's also withdrawn given the announcement today of the Reconstruction Corporation.
Thank you. And 10.5, Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, so yes, would like to move a motion of thanks for council staff, and yeah, happy to discuss if there's a seconder.
Yeah, I'll second that one.
Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, so there may need to be a couple of changes to this motion. So point 1 has already been acknowledged in a previous motion.
Yep.
And I believe that the note of thanks, point 5, has already been communicated by the General Manager to staff, but yeah, I don't know whether that needs to be removed or can stay in, but I think it's important to have a motion before Council acknowledging the outstanding work staff did. A number of staff were directly impacted by the floods. Number of staff were cut off, and others working at excessive hours and really doing an outstanding job to keep up the service level to the community.
I'll just explain to you, in the mayoral minute in March, I wrote, we've seen neighbours helping neighbours, volunteers from all walks of life doing whatever they can, and council staff, many of whom have lost their own homes, working tirelessly to get essential services back up and running. I've never been so proud to be the Mayor of Richmond Valley and part of this close-knit and caring community. I want to extend my personal thanks to all those who stepped up to lend a hand and gave so generously to their time. Now, in the March newsletter, the General Manager wrote, there's so many thanks, and I won't single anyone out. I just think we can't. And this is from the General Manager. My simple message, and this was emphasised by the Mayor at our March Council meeting, is we are proud to be leading this organisation the way we all respond in our community's hour of need. was impressive. So the thanks has been done, but that doesn't stop you from moving a motion. It might just look a bit weird if we thank him again. I don't know. We can do it twice. I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, I guess I'll take advice from the General Manager in terms of whether that line comes out as thanks has already been extended.
In my experience in local government, you can't be thanked too many times.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep. So you've taken one out because we've acknowledged the flood events earlier, and you're leaving 2, 3, 4 and 5. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Deegan and Councillor Hayes seconding. Councillor Hayes.
No, happy with that.
Okay. Any other speakers? Councillor Deegan, do you want to write a reply?
No.
I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. That was a yes, Councillor Hayes. Up to date. Page 14, Mayor's report. I'll move that.
Second.
Seconder. Don't be shy.
Second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Morrissey. Councillor Hayes.
I've got a question for you, and it's been answered in the mayoral minute, but I just thought I'd like to read it out, just so this was prepared prior to getting that information. On Thursday, the 10th of March, the New South Wales Premier and his deputy visited Woodburn and met with business representatives. On Tuesday, the 15th, we had our March Ordinary Council meeting. The feeling at this meeting, although it was emotional, was that the state government had listened and they would work in conjunction with the federal government. We were reasonably confident that we would gain quick and favourable response to our concerns about the financial burden of the recovery process. On the 5th of April, the New South Wales Premier visited Woodburn again, where you had limited time with him, but were able to pass on copies of our flood response document and our economic impact statement. I had 3 questions for you. 2 probably won't be relevant. Okay. Have you had any correspondence that these documents have been tabled and favourable responses will be forthcoming? With regards to financing, infrastructure rebuilds and repairs, and flood mitigation works. We've had those answers today and last Thursday. The other one is financial assistance for community members and businesses that were damaged by the catastrophic event. So I'm just asking if you're confident that that's going to be forthcoming.
Look.
And I asked you before in the meeting.
Yeah.
So, yep.
There's 2 issues here. We go to these meetings, and the other day I got a bit excited. Maybe I shouldn't sometimes, but I get a bit short. I won't mention his name, but he heads up one of these high-ranked departments, and he was sitting there telling me how they've got rid of a lot of the red tape, and from one agency you can just go straight in and they can go into your file and all this, and I let him go on for a while, and then I said, when he'd finished, I was moving on, I said, excuse me, I said, it's not working like that. And the General Manager was there. He said, I said, no. I said, I've been into these recovery agencies. It doesn't work like that. He said, oh, they can help you do this and they can, they'll work with you. I said, I went in and registered, and I said, so what am I entitled to? Oh, here's the website, just go in and see what programs are there. I said, that's not assisting me. I said, and there's a lot of people who have had a lot worse time than me. I said, I've been through a bit, but there's people, at least I've got a roof over my head. I said, it's not working. And then the Mayor of Lismore, he threw some figures at him of how many, you might be able to help me here, General Manager. There's a lot of applications gone in, but there hasn't been percentage-wise many processed. So as I said, I make them aware of things. Other mayors are making them aware of things. As far as replies back, Mr. General Manager might be able to help me with those. But in saying that, The amount of money that has been thrown by the two tiers of government into this disaster is unprecedented. The money's there. It's billions of dollars. Billions. But there just seems to be a hold-up in getting it out. And they announce these programs and then they don't come online for 2 or 3 weeks. And people they get, oh, this can help me, but then they get frustrated because they can't register for it. So, yeah, it's just, but money-wise, it's unprecedented. Never before. It's amazing how much money is here. It just needs to get out into the community quicker. And hopefully, couple of these new agencies may be able to help that.
I'll just help you with a little bit of that.
Sorry?
A little bit of information. The resilience grant that they offered up to $20,000, you could register for that straight away. That's all you could do. Follow-up phone calls and inquiries with them. To date, there's been very few of those grants finalised. Well, they're still designing the grant, was what they were told. And that was a week ago. So I assume nobody's got any of that money on the ground yet. The Back to Home grant, which was 15,000 plus 5,000, I think.
Yep.
9,000 applications, and they've dealt with 448 of them up until a couple of days ago. That's how slow it is.
Is the Back to Home been launched? Is it out there?
Well, they've said that they've dealt with 448 out of 9,000 applicants.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't think it had been put out there yet. Okay. Do you want to say anything, Mr. Gentleman?
That's the experience, is that, yeah, there's plenty of money being announced, but it's not getting to people as quickly as people would like it. The response that we're getting is that it's happening so much quicker than in previous natural disasters. And I'm just saying that's their response. Obviously, that's not what people want to hear because they know the money's there, so they want it in their pockets. And I think my observation is obviously the public servants that are there processing these things have guidelines and criteria that they need to follow before they can dish out the money. And I'd have to say there are reasons why that's there, because with these things there are people taking advantage of it, and they seem to be people who know how to work the system. You hear plenty of stories about where that money's going. So that is the experience. We continue to push hard on it seems to be every other day. I've been asking questions today about the $200,000 program for the business recovery, because businesses need to know. Some don't necessarily need the money now, but they need to know the money's coming and how much, so they can plan the recovery of their business. Some need it now because they don't have cash flows. So everyone's got a different story. So we're pushing hard. The word is by the end of the month. There's also been talk of a bespoke program for larger businesses. Again, that program isn't available. So again, it's about government needs to put rigour around these things, and unfortunately that means that it's taking more time than individuals would like. As far as the response docs, I haven't had a direct response from an agency that document was sent to. In some respects, that's been put directly into ministers' offices and the Premier's office, and I'd prefer they were spending their time making decisions based on that document rather than necessarily writing back to us. So hopefully they are. We've had some really positive feedback. The fact that we actually have done that, I don't think anyone else has, either a flood recovery document like that or an economic impact statement. So that was one thing we learnt from the bushfires, is to get that done quickly. So we worked hard, got that done, and hopefully it's made a difference. I haven't had a direct feedback that it has, but I suspect at some point it's had some influence, because the people who've commented on it are those in decision-making or influencing positions. So that's I suppose a response to those couple of things that I'm in regular contact with some of the larger businesses in key towns and villages to assist them, as is our economic development team, so they can, because if they get back to business, they can then employ people and the economy goes around better. That's what we're aiming to achieve.
One of the drawbacks with the business grants, they jump from 50,000 to 200,000 based on the amount of employees. There's not too many businesses in our area that employ more than 20 to get the 200,000. They
Full-
fall short, so then they drop
full
back to
time.
50,000.
That's full time.
Full time, yeah. There wouldn't be too many, I wouldn't think. Yeah. So that's another issue. It should be graded from 50 through to 200.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just my bit.
Any other questions? Put that motion then, all those in favour? No delegates' reports. Matters for determined without debate. Any councillors got any matters?
Yeah, 14.1.
Any other councillors?
15.2.
Any more? All right, councillors, I have 14.1, 15.1. 16.1. 16.3. It needs to be called, it's a planning issue, and 17.2. So I believe that leaves us, pardon me, 15.3, 16.2, 17.1, is that correct? So councillors, I needed a motion to adopt 15.3, 16.2, 17.1, please.
Moved.
Councillor Morrissey. Seconder?
Yeah, I'll second.
Councillor Hayes. Fifteen three 16.2.
Sorry, was 16.1 called?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. Councillors, the first one item is 14.1. Councillor Hayes called that. Moving.
I want to add to the recommendation.
Yep.
And if I can get a seconder, I'll read out what I want to do. Leave that council notes the information provided in the report. 2, forwards a copy of this agenda item to both our local members, inclusive of the following 4 recommendations to further enhance the urgency of the information contained in the documents already with the state and federal governments. 3, council makes further and more vigorous representation to federal and New South Wales governments on behalf of our community for significant and ongoing financial support delivered in a timely manner for the Richmond Valley, following on from the 2 major floods that have destroyed people's lives. 4, inform both levels of government that community members affected by these floods are overwhelmed and disgruntled by the need to deal with multiple agencies in order to access financial assistance to aid their recovery from these catastrophic events. 5, make them aware that the financial assistance needs to be released quickly and directly to affected residences, businesses and adjoining agricultural industries, or small towns like Coracai, Woodburn and Broadwater and their surrounding villages, the surrounding areas will not recover. 6, that the effort of the Richmond Valley Council to fund, repair and restore infrastructure in these towns will be wasted if the residents who make up these towns don't have the financial resources to recover and move forward.
I wish I had a written copy of that.
Julie's got it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know, but I wish to read it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Hayes, you're moving that?
Yes.
Seconder, please. Councillor McGillan. Councillor Hayes.
Mentioned it a few times through the meeting. I think it's important that the financial situation of our community members is addressed and addressed by the government, and it's addressed sooner rather than later. And all those items there need certainty. They need to know if this money's forthcoming, if it's not forthcoming. You know, and there's information out there about if you qualify for one grant, you don't qualify for the other. All that stuff needs to be out there. They need that information so they can move forward. Otherwise, we're going to have people leaving the place. There's property starting to come on the market already. And this afternoon, I heard an interview on RVC radio after Dominic Perrottet's announcement there today about the people jumping in too quickly to repair their homes. They actually said that if you jump in too quickly and get moving, you might miss out. That's wrong, as far as I'm concerned. They need to get back in their houses sooner rather than later. There's money getting chewed up with, with rental assistance, with giving out caravans, giving out motorhomes. All that money, the quicker they get back in their own home, that expenditure stops and it gets aimed back at their own homes. And the money starts, the money's there to start invigorating these towns and getting them going again. We have businesses that have worked very hard, and I'm only talking in Woodburn, and I'm sure there'll be some in Coracai and other places. They're working so hard to get going. They're running off the people that are in town during the recovery. As soon as they leave, they're empty. Those businesses are going to say, why do I open my doors today? They need people living back in their own homes sooner rather than later.
Any other speakers? I'll just pick up on, pardon me, on one word there in 3, makes further more vigorous representation. I can assure you, as you've heard what I've told you tonight, I'm not leaving any stone unturned, and word vigorous, I don't know what else I can do. I really do. Every time I get a chance, I really hook in the best I can.
I'm not questioning what anyone's done or what anyone can do. I think this needs to be presented and let the government deal with it.
Yeah. It's just, I know Vaughan's doing his best. He has a say, and it's not always real polite to him because we tell him how it is, and that's what we're here for.
I recall having 2 conversations, one with you, one with Vaughan at different times, and the frustration in your voices about these matters, you could tell.
Yeah.
I got a couple of swear words, one out of each of yous. Back in the last meeting, we had a flood event status report prepared by the General Manager, and the word in that one was strongly, and I'll change it to vigorously for this one.
That's all right, leave it in there, it's fine. But I'm just saying, I'm just letting you know that we are doing it. And on the last point, the efforts of the Richmond Valley to fund, repair and restore infrastructure in these homes is a wasted. And I know it was in that previous, I think it was Councillor Deegan's one that he withdrew about it's a bigger effort than Richmond Valley to be able to do this by ourselves. And on the document for the response on page 19, it clearly says it will take an enormous amount of effort and support for those affected to rebuild their lives. Richmond Valley Council and the wider community will be there every step of the way to support the individuals, families, businesses and farmers impacted by this disaster. And this is the key point, but we cannot do this alone. Our council needs strategic investment, open engagement and strong leadership from all levels of governments to meet this overwhelming challenge, and we do. It's quite clear if we don't get support, our community won't come back stronger, and they say build back stronger and better, and that's why we need that support. But it's in there, and I just hope they take the time to read that document.
Today, when I sent this through to Julie, I sent a second one through, Julie, one with the spelling mistake. I withdrew part number 7. Have you still got that, Julie?
On my email, I would have. Hang on.
Just while they're sorting that, on page 17, there's a paragraph there. All members of our community are encouraged to tell their story of the flood events by making submissions to the inquiry. As I said earlier, these submissions coming from the community, I think they will have as much weight as a council. We can reiterate it, but these experiences, no one can tell it like the people who live through it. And I think, you know, there'll be some harrowing stories that'll come out. There'll be some heroic stories, and So, and it says council is preparing a submission to the inquiry, which is due by the 20th of March 2022, and information will be sought soon to be established community advisory groups, and from discussions with a range of residents, primary producers, businesses, and industry stakeholders impacted by the flood. Council has also sought to meet with the inquiry representatives to highlight the impacts of the floods and lessons to be learnt from what has occurred. So hopefully we can get them, meet those people, and make some engagement with those two people who will be overseeing the inquiry. I don't know if you've heard any feedback from them. And maybe Mr. General Manager might want to make a comment on the community advisory groups.
Yeah, happy to do that. So we're establishing community advisory groups in Woodburn, Broadwater and Corrockeye. I think one of those is meeting this week, tomorrow. So we've identified members in those communities to contribute to those. Obviously we're building on the success of the Rapville advisory group that was formed following the bushfires. We identified through our engagement and support in that community, we identify people who we know will have good contributions to make, have good connections in the community, and will focus on recovery and a positive path out of this. So we've got those groups underway. I just thought I'd comment, given the reports obviously about flood recovery, but also I think just to reflect on the public access from Ms Johnston earlier this evening. Just a couple of comments, I suppose, just to respond, is that we certainly haven't and won't be forgetting the Bunga Walban. And I think it's important that people living in that area know the efforts that Director Jones, as our LEMO, put in through the Emergency Operations Centre to ensure that efforts were made by the RFS and the SES to continue to supply that area. There was a level of frustration, I must say, on our part about the responsiveness and responsibility for that, but we'll deal with that in an after-action process. But we certainly made many attempts to increase the support, and it was good to hear that there was some support delivered down that way. But we certainly will be identifying that there needs to be a better way to respond to support that community in flood events in particular, following this one. Just the other one around waste pickup in that area. That is commencing this week because we can now actually get vehicles into that area. And as of this afternoon, we had, it was over a dozen properties booked in. So if there are other residents in that area and you have flood affected waste that you would like picked up, you need to contact council and get on that list. Our aim is to get what is in that area cleaned up by the end of next week. So contact us and communicate your situation to us so that our team can get down there. I will say that that's probably one of the highlights of the flood recovery is the waste cleanup, because we can remember after the bushfires that obviously happened on the 8th of October, we were still cleaning up towards the end of January. So here we are, less than 2 months in, and more than 80%, 90% potentially of the cleanup has been done. So I think acknowledgement there that it's happened quicker. I know it's still for some people hasn't happened quick enough, but it's certainly improved on previous efforts. And the last thing I'll just mention is road access. Our priority is to focus on restoring access as quickly as we can to all areas for two-wheel drive vehicles. That commenced and is happening in sections of Bunga-Walbin-Whipperoo Road as soon as we're able to get in there. It is difficult because you need to wait for it to dry and you need to be able to access the whole length of it. So initially it's just restoring emergency access. Once that is achieved, we will then, once the pavement has dried out enough, adding gravel and restoring the road. Obviously a lot of drainage work that needs to be done by excavators. So it will be a time-consuming process, but I can assure the people of the Bunga-Walbin that I'm sure they're seeing it each day. We've got contractors down there doing the work to get their life back to normal as quickly as we can.
Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, I guess just following on that with the advisory groups and the comments of Ms Johnson earlier tonight, Bunga-Walbin and Swan Bay, will they feed into one of those groups such as Woodburn, or do they require a separate advisory group, or what would the process be there?
I think it's a good point. I'd need to check the membership. Obviously, I suppose it's both Corrico and Woodburn have sort of communities of interest with the Bunga-Walbin, but it's a good point. So we'll take that on board, and someone like Ms Johnson might be. She's obviously got some good insights. We are in contact with residents through there, but we don't necessarily have an advisory group identified. So potentially they could feed into one of those groups that we've set up. So we'll take that on notice, and our recovery team will put something in place to make sure we're in the loop with people in the Bunga-Walbin area.
Yeah, and just also following on from Ms Johnson's comments in relation to the Bunga-Walbin levy, so that falls under Rouse from what I understand. Should we be writing to Rouse requesting an urgent review or urgent inspections of the levy, just to advocate on behalf of people in that area?
My view is that operationally they won't have been able to actually get anything in there in between the two flood events because everything's so wet to fix it. I'm sure it's on their radar. I know they fixed it after last year's flooding event, but the fact that it's broken again is obviously not a good sign. So I'm happy to have a chat with the General Manager of Rouse and get an update on what's happening. I'm sure they're aware of it. It's a matter of, well, what's their plan to fix it? So I'm happy to find that out and report back to you.
Well, I can answer that. I have actually spoke to the General Manager about it. Our General Manager is correct. There's just no access. And when you get there, the heavy machinery just can't operate. And to get trucks in there and fill, it's just not feasible. So as soon as they can, they'll be onto it.
Yeah, and I guess I was asking for an urgent review, but it sounds like they're already onto that. But maybe we could have a report on that at the next meeting.
Well, if it comes up at the Rouse meeting, if we have a meeting before then, there's a lot of things happening over there just at present. They're not back in their offices, so they're having extraordinary meetings, and tomorrow we have a workshop, and it's up at Lismore Heights Bowling Club. So they're still out. So they're doing their best. they got wiped out, as you can imagine, in Lismore, South Lismore, Woodburn. So the sooner they get down to Ballina, the better. That site didn't go underwater. But no, they are aware, and as the general manager over there said, he's got OH&S responsibilities with his staff. He just can't put them in harm's way, and nobody would want that. So as soon as they can get there, they will get there. They're fully aware of it. I just want to make a couple of statements. One was about the waste in the lower river. There was a lag. The waste actually stopped being picked up, and I had a couple of phone calls and pulled up twice on Rowley's Hill Road and asked why the waste had sat there for another 4 days. And I said, well, the access to Peterson's quarry was closed. It was flooded, and you could have picked their waste up, but you couldn't take it anyway. So that's why the waste took longer to get away. So when I explained that to them, oh yeah, that makes sense. So, but it was just a bit of frustration. They didn't know why it hadn't been moved, and their neighbours had. The other thing, on the advisories committees, Mr. General Manager, I know that councils can attend, but the councillors need to be made aware of when those meetings will be occurring. I didn't know there was one tomorrow, but not that I can attend it, but yeah. Any other speakers?
Just on the waste, I understand that the 30th of April they stop, is that right? Picking up waste off the side of the road?
Sounds like that's right. I knew it was. I know it's creeping up. And look, it's important that if that deadline is going to create an issue for people with some unique circumstances, just contact us and have a chat to our team. Be my message. No need to light up Facebook. Come and have a chat to us. Our team are flexible, but we do have to have an endpoint because obviously there's other arrangements for the transferal of the waste from the transfer stations to their final destination. So just give us a call.
I mentioned that radio interview this afternoon, told everyone to slow down, don't go ripping in. So there's going to be waste at a later date. So whether it's been covered by insurance company for removal or whatever, it's going to get put back out in the street again. You can tell. So I don't know how we deal with that. But.
Yep, you're right, because I know one person whose assessor doesn't come till the 27th, and their waste is still up at their house, which is mostly 300 metres from their rural property, and then they have to be able to get it down there, and the weather conditions aren't real conducive to that, and the time frame. So I just said to them, contact council. Yeah.
I think an important message there is that you don't have to wait for your assessor. There's advice from the Insurance Council of Australia that you don't have to wait for assessor to turn up to do what you need to do to your property. What you do need to do is to take photos and make, obviously take records of the state of the property, but you don't have to wait because obviously it is important to get in quickly to avoid, mould issues and also give the property a chance to dry out, which obviously means you can get back in there quicker. So that advice has been made available through our Facebook page, but obviously aware that not everyone sees that, and there has been a lot of information pushed out. So if anyone's talking with anyone in that situation, that advice has been issued by the Insurance Council of Australia. So if you have trouble with your insurance company, go straight to them, Insurance Council of Australia.
Councillor Deegan.
So there's also just discussion here in relation to flood-affected properties and damaged, lost water meters. I guess in terms of what options council's looking at in terms of addressing that, will water bills be averaged over previous use, or what options is council looking at, or are there options? Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're certainly well aware of that. And we'd actually just issued the water bills for the period just prior to the flood. So we've actually got obviously a 3-month period to assess how we best do that, but it will be, on a basis of averaging over a similar period of time, because obviously we are aware that in some cases where there's either a lost water meter or where there's no record, but there are also cases where hot water systems broke away and huge amounts of water still went through the house, so the meter's obviously done more work than it would have normally, meaning the bill would be a lot higher. So our revenue team will go through, I suppose, a process of assessing and reviewing people's bills to see where the outliers are and see how we can deal with that. I suppose again a message once we get to that point will be for residents who think that their bill is abnormal to pick up the phone and chat to our team, and we'll review that situation.
Cool. And just one more point, I'm not sure, it was discussed at the last meeting under the flood recovery update around rate relief, and there were 3 different options looked at that time, and I think as an interim measure, option 1 was adopted interimly for the other options to come back to council. Is that something we can look at tonight, or will it be at the next council meeting?
We've obviously written that letter to the Premier seeking a rate relief program similar to what occurred in the bushfires. We haven't had that confirmed as yet. That was a process where the New South Wales Government funded rate relief for a period of time directly to the ratepayer. So in doing it that way, it doesn't affect our revenue stream, which we obviously need to do what we do on a daily basis, but that people get it as a rebate through Service New South Wales. So we're pushing for the same or a similar scheme to be put in place. So at this point, the rate relief in our situation is for interest to not be applied, and that we still have the financial hardship, and natural disaster is dealt with in our financial hardship policy. So again, encourage people to chat with our team to know what their options are at the moment, but we're also pushing hopefully that that full rate relief scheme for a period of time may be supported by the New South Wales Government.
Any other speakers?
Yeah, I might have follow-up questions after the meeting around that, just to clarify. Yep.
Just a real quick one. We talked about water meters, the garbage bins.
I think they've been, we know we collected a lot, particularly I think down around Woodburn there was a few collected. I think the Army supported us with that as well, which is great. But we'll be getting them back to people's properties, and I'm pretty sure they won't be charged for them. I don't know whether Director Zeller wants to add something there.
I know some people who are actually still in their houses haven't got garbage bins. The other ones where people aren't living in them, I don't think that's really over urgent, but I suppose they could use it to throw a bit of... Mr. Zeller.
If people have lost their garbage bins, they've just got to give us a ring at the front counter, and we will replace that bin and have it delivered to them.
Thank you. Right, any other speakers? Councillor Hayes, right to reply.
I'd just like to, just hang on, I get this one open and enlarge it so I can read it. When I put those recommendations in there, I had a 7th one, and I pulled it out because I thought that the stuff that come out from the state government today had it well and truly covered. I'd just like to read it to you. I don't think it needs to go back in there. And you touched on it a while ago. I said that change glasses. That the size and scale of this disaster cannot be rectified by the community nor the local council. A combined effort from both state and federal governments is needed to fund and coordinate the entire response that is required to rebuild our communities in the Richmond Valley. So I had that in there, but I think that response come today, and I think it's in the pipeline. So I don't think that needs to be.
Yeah, it's in that response document. All right, so that closes the debate. That was a right of reply. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimous. 15.1 on page 19, I'll move that. Seconder,
Second.
Councillor Morrissey. Councillors, I just want to mention that there's one paragraph there that when people see fraud and corruption control plan, they start to think of all the nasties. But there is a paragraph, a phrase there that says, whilst council exposed to fraud was deemed to be at a low to medium level, the plan was recommended to improve awareness with the organisation and to formalise council's position with regard to fraud and corruption. That just, to me, says that council's aware of it, and the staff are on the front foot with this, and they're proactive, and it's better, in these situations, better be proactive than reactive. So I congratulate the staff on that. Any other speakers? I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. (15.2). I'll move that. Seconder?
Yeah, I'll second.
Councillor Deegan. Councillors, this is just to give you a bit of information. This report's the Director of Ryan Gator, but responsible officer is Dean Fordham, and most of the councillors in the room would, and some of the staff would realise that Dean's was here longer than any other, most probably people in the room. A member of council staff, but Dean's moved on. And yep, and I noticed Councillor Hayes' eyes lit up. Dean's always give us sound financial advice, and he's well respected in the organisation, but he has moved on to a less drive location, and I think I've had a good talk to him, and I think he'll excel in the new role, and it's sorry to see him go. So that's all. I'll no other speakers.
Yeah.
Do we seek legal advice on our investments?
Not so much legal advice, but we do talk to our financial advisors on what investments we make and get advice off them.
I'll just add to that, though, that legally under the Local Government Act, you are required to only invest in products that there is a ministerial order. So obviously the Minister of Local Government issues that order, and it severely limits what you can invest in. Obviously the products we invest in allow that, otherwise we wouldn't be. And that order was significantly tightened and given more prominence as a result of the GFC and the losses that many councils did suffer from through that period with CDOs. So in effect, we do have a legal position that we have to follow, and we do that, and we also have an investment policy that we're required to have, and we comply with that as well.
And also, when that financial crisis hit, yes, Richmond Valley did lose some money, like the majority of councils in the state, but some of those returns were still coming back 5 or 6 years later. And it was surprising some of the, you'd recall that, some of the amounts would pop up. So sometimes, by some storytellers, those issues aren't acknowledged. You only get one side of the argument. Councillor Deegan.
Yeah, I guess just noting some of the comments of Dr. Gates in relation to investments in the fossil fuel industry and so forth. I note here that it does state that 67.1% of the investments have no direct investment in the fossil fuel industry. Given events that have occurred in the Richmond Valley over recent years, like obviously we can't say that any individual event is as a result of climate change. We do know that this is what climate change looks like, and as a council, we probably do have a responsibility to review the current investments, and is this something that we could possibly look at a workshop? What would be the financial impacts if we did withdraw investments from fossil fuel industry? Yeah, just a comment, but something we may wish to consider.
Look, this has been around for coming and going and bounced off many walls over the years. It can be looked at again, but as we say, if you the policy is if we can get the product for the same as any other investment, we'll take the fossil fuel one. And no investment in fossil fuel. But if it's going to cost the ratepayers money, we do take the other alternative. And bear in mind, if it's going to cost the ratepayers a lot of money, we have to cut those services out of our budget. So we'll have to identify then what services we remove from our community. In saying that, the majority investment are starting to go away from fossil fuels, so I would expect that 67% to gradually climb in coming years. Yep.
Just to wrap up, we do review our investment policy annually. That's correct, isn't it, Ryan? Yep. So, it's something that we do annually. So it's, in less than 12 months ago, the investment policy was adopted, and it will get reviewed again. And I think we do it around the end of the financial year, from memory. So when we review it, we can obviously brief you as a new councillor. We can give you a more detailed briefing on, I suppose, the history of it, and you can consider the options.
Any other speakers? Put that motion then. All those in favour? 16.1. I call that. I'll move that. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Hayes. Hayes, councillors, all I really call this for two quick things. One's we're starting to get a lot of inquiries, as the report says, on this, and I think we will get more. As the report says, it's a complex process. I think this will now be thrown into amongst some of these reviews that are being done. But I think, well, it says somewhere that this program was last reviewed in February 2022, which is not long ago. But maybe that review will need, sounds a bit stupid, but that review might need to be reviewed again. To see if there's any opportunities for these house owners to. So I think if we could push that barrier a bit to see if there's any way that this program could help our residents going forward. Councillor Deegan?
Yeah, and I think from what I saw in relation to the Reconstruction Corporation that house racing options might be a part of their scope as well, if I remember correctly.
It was mentioned, along with buybacks and... Sorry? Yeah, land swaps and that. But yeah, there'll be a lot of people who won't qualify it, so maybe there needs to be a bit of adjustment in the heights of floods and things like that so they can take advantage of it. Any other speakers?
Yeah, me. Yep. Yeah,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor, it says here it's an opportunity to review the flood study, the one that was finalised nearly finalised in February in 2022. I'm just wondering, the results of the government, the New South Wales government flood inquiry, and the possible mitigation works that may follow will affect the results of these studies once again. They'll change flood levels more than likely, and yeah. So, as there's not a timeline on this inquiry as yet, and other submissions have, and I note that submissions have to be into that inquiry by the 20th of May, okay? But now they've introduced another inquiry as of today, is that right? A further inquiry?
Well, there's the New South Wales Government's inquiry,
Yep.
which is underway. There's also a parliamentary committee that's conducting an inquiry which has basically the same or similar terms of reference. So they're the two inquiries that I'm aware of.
So with that, those thoughts, it says, are we able to continue with the existing flood plans for the next 12 months or maybe longer? Or what do? We just stop?
Through you, Mr
Director
Mayor.
Jones.
I think it's prudent that we continue with our flood studies and then our floodplain risk management plan. And whilst floodplains are always going to change, and if there's mitigation or other works that come out of whatever inquiries in the future, we'll have to then adjust our flood modelling. But having a new model that is contingent over basically the whole of Richmond Valley, and I think we've explained previously, our flood modelling was a bit piecemeal and on different sort of models, and they didn't talk to one another. So having that body of work done, and if we can incorporate some of the knowledge that we've gained from these recent flood events into that and finalise that study and do the risk management plan, I think we're 10 steps ahead. Should anything come out of mitigation works and the like, then we'll obviously need to adjust our flood modelling and our risk management plan at a later date. But my advice is we need to keep on going and have something that is workable and usable based on the knowledge that we have today, and if things change in the future, we can always change it then.
So if you ask for a flood inquiry on your property as of tomorrow or next week, it'll be based on what's in place now? Nothing will change?
At this point in time, we haven't adopted our new flood modelling or a risk plan, so it's based on what we have at hand today. But we'd probably, at this point in time, I haven't actually tackled that question, we'd probably put a big question mark and a disclaimer and proviso on it saying that we are currently finalising a flood study and that there'll be more relevant and factual information. But we can only do what we can do with the information that we have at hand at that very point in time. But obviously things have changed.
Any other speakers? Put that motion, and all those in favour? Carried, unanimous. 16.3. That's me again. Can I get a seconder, please?
Second, Mr Mayor.
I have a question, Mr. General Manager. Are staff able to go on this, or is it got to be Director Jones?
We currently have an agreement of sorts with Lismore. We are in the process of finalising it. So at this point in time, I am the representative, or one of the representatives for Lismore City Council, and one of their directors can be a representative on our.
Okay.
So we do have a reciprocal arrangement, and that's at a nil cost to either organisation. We do it out of the goodness of our heart. So I'd like to continue that arrangement, and we've previously always had a councillor on the panel as nominated. You can go outside council and outside staff and appoint or lawyers and planning professionals, etc. But we are then bound to pay for their services. So we tend to stick to council staff with reciprocal arrangements with alternate local government areas and council laws.
Okay, I just need a bit more help. So we need.
Definition of council member. Does a council member include an elected director and a staff member, or both? This report says council member.
So what I'm getting at is we need 2 nominees.
Yep.
And 2 alternates. So we need 4. Is that correct?
Yes.
And staff can be members at another, like Lismore have an alternate arrangement. Mm-hmm. And as the General Manager just asked, can a staff member be this council's member for ourselves?
Mr Mayor, I can't 100% guarantee that would be the case. I think that given council staff determining applications for our own local government area, there'd be potential conflicts of interest there. And I'd suggest that we would steer away from that, and that with the reciprocal arrangement that we have with Lismore City at the moment, if the director is not available, then by agreement, another director or a senior planning member or an engineer, depending on what type of application might be required to be assessed, that by agreement another person can stand in as the alternate.
So we have got one from Lismore, so we need...
Either one from our councillors, or we look at appointing somebody outside of council as a sort of a third party.
who you'd have to...
Can I just add something? With the councillors' participation, a number of times we have a conflict, okay? So why wouldn't we have a Lismore or Kyogle councillor, and the councillor from here does their council area, the same as the arrangement with the staff? Make it a lot clearer.
See,
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, that's possible. What I would also recommend on my experience is that the panels are set up that they can make a determination without any council representation, and on a number of occasions, due to conflicts of interest, that we have given our blessing to the panel to make a determination. I don't think that we have had any issues that have come from those decisions, and that we've been fully supportive of the panel's recommendations to date, and they're able to carry on without representations from Richmond Valley if we had a conflict of interest with our nominated representatives.
so Councillor Hayes, you've been a previous appointee. Are you still interested?
I'm happy to do it, but like I said, there's a lot of stuff that comes up where you've got your conflict. You can't sit on it anyway. So,
Yeah.
but if you're happy with that, I'm happy to do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So... Call for nominations. Any other councillor interested? Look, and just nominate yourself. I don't need one to move and second and all that, so anyone else is interested? Put your light on, please, councillor. Sorry?
I'll decline because I'm not really sure what it's all about.
It's all right. Yeah. And maybe for a new councillor, it's a lot of learning. Yeah.
It's a learning curve if you don't know the system and how it works. It's actually quite interesting, and it's quite good to sit back and see how they evolve and how they get answers to problems with development applications, and how they, how they get a path through to a determination through meetings, and it's quite interesting.
I'll be cheeky. I'm going to nominate, and subject to his acceptance, Councillor Cornish. I think he'd... No, subject to his acceptance, I think he would like something like this. Yeah. So is that enough? We only had two before, didn't we? That's all we ever had was two. Yeah, all right, okay.
Yeah, they should.
So should we put Peter Dugan, or whatever it is? Is it Peter Dugan?
Yes, it is.
Heather.
Peter.
So Peter Dugan.
Who you got?
Peter Dugan, who is the Lismore director.
So Councillor Cornish is an alternate. Julie, he's a nominated member. Yeah, Councillor Cornish would be the alternate. So Councillor Hayes is the primary, Councillor Cornish is the alternate. And Mr Peter Dugan of Lismore City Council is our nominated member, or an alternate staff member by agreement from Lismore City Council.
I think that'll cover it.
The second alternate would depend on what type of application needed to be determined. So it would be maybe another engineering director or a planner. No, it's from Lismore City Council. Or an alternate Lismore City Council staff member by agreement. That should cover
So
it.
this recommendation, do you have to name them in that recommendation? Yeah. Okay. All right, so that's, I'm happy that is moved, and councillor Morris, you're okay with that? Okay. Any other speakers? I'll put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. 17.2. I call that. I have a question. Could I get a seconder, please? It's the recommendation. I move the recommendation. Councillor Hayes. Mr. General Manager, just a question where it relates to the fee. And on page 39, the second paragraph, it says that consider connection principles, that is, whether or not the rapid, and it's upon its completion, therefore pay an annual sewerage charge of $1,110 in 2022-23. I think that's when it's finished, when it's actually engaged. So what if it hasn't opened in that, or hasn't been completed and operational in that 22-23 financial year? Do they still pay that fee?
No. So that is in brackets because it's indicating that the fee that will be in our draft revenue policy for the 22-23 financial year will be $1,110.
Yeah.
The aim of this project is to have it completed by the end of the financial year, by 30 June 2023. That's probably going to be a touch optimistic, but that's what we're driving towards. So they would, if we met that time frame, they would get levied that fee in the 23-24 financial year, or if it were delayed, prorated appropriately.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Any other speakers? Okay, I'll put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Page 44, general business, there's nil. Page 45, matters for information. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Morrissey.
Mr. Mayor.
Seconder. Councillor Deegan. Has any councillor got any issue they'd like to raise? No? I'd just like to mention on page 45 the call statistics. When you see 10,908 calls, it's an increase of 34.2% and a 38.9% over the previous quarter. I think that's, and to only 85% of the calls are answered with 20 seconds. Average time a caller spends on the queue is 17 seconds, sorry. And the percentage rate for all calls abandoned is less than 1. I can tell you I've been making a lot of calls through this flood, and I'm talking half an hour to an hour wait. They just bung you on hold, and after a while I just get sick of it and hang up. So I think that's an outstanding figure for our customer service. It really is. I'd like you to just relay that back to them if you could, please, Mr. General Manager.
It's a fair analogy, isn't it? I've spent a little bit of time on hold lately as well on a few matters. Up to an hour in one case, so 17 seconds. Ooh, how good would that be?
Yeah. Councillor Deegan?
Oh, yeah, no, I guess I'm just noting there as well for that period with the 34.2% increase, a lot of that would have been a lot of that time is during the flood period, when there would have been significant staff shortages and extra pressures, so that's pretty amazing. And like to have a 1% abandonment rate with an average of 17 seconds, that had mostly people, I forgot to grab my pen or whatever, or I've called the wrong number, so yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Outstanding. Any other items? I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. Page 70, questions on notice. Councillor Hayes. Confused, Mr General Manager. Usually we just get an answer. Today we have a recommendation.
Yeah, I must apologise. That's actually in error. A question on notice should just have the response, which we've provided, and I think we've covered those items that are listed as a recommendation in there in those matters we've done earlier this evening. So, yeah, there shouldn't be a recommendation on that question on notice.
So we don't need a recommendation here?
No, it's purely providing a response to the question that Councillor Hayes asked at the previous meeting.
Are you happy with that response that we've had through the meeting?
Yeah, the responses were from the start of the meeting right up till now, and the answers have all been the same.
And look, I know it's not a I'll just make a comment, but that part too, encourage residents to make submissions directly to the inquiry. I think that's a very, very important thing we have to kind of get out there. I think it'll have more sway than a lot of councils. So.
I've asked individuals to just write their story from when they started, what's happened,
Yep.
you know, when the flood heights were predicted, what they've done, how they got caught in their houses, how they got out, who rescued them, from just dot point form, put it in there.
Yep. Okay, we'll now move on to questions for the next meeting in writing. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I have one. Julie has a copy of it. I'll read it to you so you know what it is. I understand that council is seeking adoption of a natural disaster clause into council's LEP by late May 2022. I said, what has instigated this and what will the effects of this clause have on natural disasters in the Richmond Valley Council in the future?
Mr General Manager, do you want to answer that tonight or take it on notice?
I was just tracking the email, but yeah, it's on the screen. So this was an opt-in clause, and what it effectively... Actually, why don't I hand over to Director Jones? She's the planner in the room. I'm sure she can answer it far more articulately than I.
Well, you'll correct me if I'm wrong anyway, so it's all good.
Director Jones.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So essentially this opt-in clause acknowledges a dwelling on a property that may, if it was impacted by a natural disaster, that no matter whether the LEP has any prohibitions, it will still be acknowledged as allowing a dwelling on that property. So if you have a farmhouse on a rural block of land and it was maybe a bushfire affected it, and for some reason the LEP actually prohibited a dwelling house on that property for whatever reason, that this opt-in clause will allow council to acknowledge the existence of a house as long as it was lawful and allow it to be rebuilt on there, but that new structure would have to meet today's standards. So there would be some instances where it possibly could happen, but it's just acknowledging an existing dwelling house as a dwelling house that was there and that we allow a dwelling house to be re-established under current building guidelines. So the plan was that we can, it's as simple as getting the General Manager to, with a letter, signing off to say that we would like to opt in on that clause, and that's the proposal that we're going to, the path we're going to take, given we don't want to wait for another council meeting. I think it'll just make it a little easier and simpler, and hopefully streamline a process if anyone is in this situation.
Thank you. That answer the question, councillor Hayes? Thank you. Councillors, we now move over to page 72. Matters referred to closed council. I need a recommendation to go into closed council, please.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Morrissey,
I'll second.
councillor Hayes. Mr General Manager, has there been any written representation made regarding this meeting going to closed council? If so, could you read the representation, please?
Yes, have received an objection for this matter going to closed council from Dr Richard Gates as an executive member of the Evans Head Residents for Sustainable Development, stating that council has failed to provide any information about the loan borrowing program. No justification is provided for the secrecy, and goes on to make that point. Do you want me to read that in full? I can if you like. Says that's not good enough in the interests of transparency. Section 8A2E of the Local Government Act as amended. And accountability, the public needs to learn what the loan borrowing program is about. There is no context for the proposal. As it presently stands, council could make the claim that a pigs might fly program. Discussion should be held behind closed doors because it might prejudice the commercial position of the proponent, but the public would be none the wiser about the porcine program. Surely the program can be separated from the proponent without prejudicing the commercial interests of the proponent. So I suppose in response to that, the loan borrowing program was approved in council's budget for this financial year, and we also do have to submit to the Office of Local Government our loan borrowing return. This item in closed council is merely determining the rates at which we're able to borrow those funds. Hence, those rates are commercial in confidence.
Thank you. Are there any verbal representations from the members of the public?
Thank you, General Manager, for that response. I'm still not clear completely about that matter, other than it's to deal with rates, but I would appreciate if you're going to go behind closed doors in future, if you would tell us about the quantum and nature of something. It doesn't have to give anything away about the proposal whatsoever. So I think the information doesn't hurt in the circumstances that helps with transparency. There was none of that in this particular budget year. For all I know, it could have been a borrowing or a loan scheme that you made with a private individual. We don't know. And it could involve only $10 or it could involve $100 million. We don't know. We need to know about quantum. The point you made earlier to do with responses about something. It's important that happen, otherwise it creates suspicion about why is a matter of this kind going on close to when we know nothing about it. That's all I have to say. I still think it's a matter that should be held in open council.
Yeah, I agree. It is a good point, Dr. Gates, and we will be recommending in the recommendation a bit more information to outline what the borrowing is for, and that will be then in the recommendation that is released publicly, both what it's for and the amounts of money, because that is not commercial in confidence information. So I think you raise a valid point, and we're happy to reflect that in what we are able to disclose publicly.
Thank you. I think that's really important to do that, and it actually raises some other interesting points which I won't labour now because it's getting late into the night. But it's a start on what I think should be an evaluation of time that you did take all.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Mr General Manager, could you read or ask a staff member to read the recommendations from closed session, please?
Yeah, Director Zeller can look after the first one.
In the item
Director Zeller.
22.1, proposed residential and industrial property acquisition, recommend that 1, subject to completion of relevant financial due diligence, Council authorises the General Manager to negotiate the purchase of the land generally in accordance with the details contained within this report. 2, Council authorises the General Manager to endorse relevant documents, contracts and transfers, including affixing the seal of Council where appropriate, for the purchase of the land generally in accordance with the details contained in this report. And 3, and 3, that a report on the progress of the acquisition be provided at key decision points.
Thank you.
And Director Gator will do the next two.
Director Gator.
I've actually got it on my computer, Jules, thanks. Item 22.2, loan borrowing program for the 2021-2022 year. Recommend that Council authorise the borrowing of $4,740,000 for the funding of 3 garbage trucks, upgrades to the Casino Memorial Pool and construction of Cell 6 at Namoona Landfill as previously adopted as part of Council's current delivery program. Number 2, authorise the execution of the business letter of offer from the National Australia Bank. And number 3, authorise the affixing of Council seal to any documents to execute the loan borrowings outlined in this report. And for report 22.3, tender supply and delivery of water meters, T552122 RCT. Recommendation that number 1, due to the responses received not offering best value result for Council, all tenderers be rejected in accordance with clause 178(1)(b) of the Local Government General Regulation 2021, and that in accordance with clause 178(3)(e), negotiations be held with the suitable suppliers to minimise the cost of meter replacement for Council. And number 2, that the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of Council where necessary. And number 3, such contract be for a period of 1 May 2022 to 30 April 2023.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr General Manager? That closes the meeting. Thank you for your attendance and travel safely home. Councillor Deegan, did you say you wanted to ask some questions? Could you? Oh no, I'll email. Yeah, that